There were two recounts in the Corby by-election today, but not because the Labour victory was in any doubt. The flurry of extra activity was caused by the Liberal Democrats, who thought they were in with a chance of saving their deposit. They weren't. They were a fourth, behind a resurgent UKIP and a Conservative candidate who was drafted in after the high-profile sitting Conservative went to spend more time with her family. The Labour candidate will be seeing a lot less of his. He won with a swing of more than 12%. Allegra Stratton has spent the day in the constituency.
A by-election is pretty standard fare. In fact, maybe without you noticing it, around this country there have been at least half a dozen since this government changed hands. There are a couple more later this month. Ballots licked, posted and flicked. In Britain, these bite-sized referendums have been more frequent than hot weather. What on earth was all the fuss about today? Or what on Mars? Let me introduce you to the Corby crater. This isn't really the Corby crater, we couldn't afford it, but it will do. The real Corby crater is a great big hole up on Mars, but the departure of Louise Mensch for America leaves a Tory MP-shaped hole in Corby. It threatens to scar David Cameron's tenure. It would be the first his party has lost since joining government. Here we are in Corby at the scene of the destruction wrought by Louise Mensch. It looks like a huge hole has been driven through David Cameron's leadership. It wasn't meant to be like this. Super Thursday was supposed to see a huge flourishing of democratic uprising. Voters were supposed to flock to the polls to vote for the Prime Minister's new idea of police chiefs. But it looks like they haven't. And this by-election doesn't look good either. Is this a new low for David Cameron? You lot are feeling it in Corby, are you? You've got friends and colleagues out of work?
I have a lot of friends out of work.
What about yourself?
I'm out of work, you know. I haven't worked in a long time, you know. I've tried to get a job, you know, but it's so hard out there, you know.
One study described Corby as the UK's hotspot for youth unemployment. People in Cameron Court voted on this, on the possibility of a hospital service closure, and on immigration.
All the who spoke that came round about Conservative, about the other parties, didn't seem interested in local issues, about the hospital and what's going on and what was happening and just generally. And I just thought, well, this time I'm voting. I know who I'm going to vote for, the people that was anxious to talk to me and listen to me.
Hilda told me about her fears of immigration. Her son had managed a team of foreign workers before losing his work while they stayed on. Ed Miliband devoted chunks of his conference speech to preventing this kind of thing, curbing the once uncurbable EU immigration. You clearly like the local candidate. What do you think about the national candidate, Ed Miliband?
Well, some things is good, some things I don't understand them sometimes.
What don't you understand?
Well, it seems a bit wishy-washy. Well, when he came here, he didn't even come into the town. He went to one of the villages.
Moments later, Labour would be declared the winner.
And I do hereby declare that Andrew Salford is duly elected as the Member of Parliament.
The first victory for the newly coined One Nation Labour Party. Labour's just won in Corby, and that's why Ed Miliband is just turning up in this village, Middleton. Middletown, Middle England. You can see what message they're trying to ram home here. Cheers here in Middleton, but elsewhere in the country, Labour had failed to win the mayoral election in Bristol. Last month, the Tory peer Lord Ashcroft had published polling showing that while many Tories were switching to Labour in Corby, not as many could see Miliband as Prime Minister. Remember from earlier our interviewee Hilda, who lived in Cameron Court. Can we ask you a quick question? We've spoken to Labour voters today who liked Andy Salford a lot. They voted for him, but they said that you were, in their words, wishy-washy. Do you have more work to do?
We've always got more work to do.
But do you personally? Is your message not quite getting out there?
We've always got more work to do, but I think this result shows that people are turning towards the Labour Party. People are hearing our message, and we're going to go on from this result to take our message right across this country.
On the eve of his victory in 1997, Tony Blair won in the Wirral South by-election with a swing of 17%. Today, Ed Miliband saw a swing of nearly 13%. That's more than the 8% swing to his party when it last captured the seat from the Conservatives in 1997. But the Tories today pointed out that in the Crewe and Nantwich by-election, there was a 17.6% swing to them. That was just before they formed part of a government. But back to the here and now. Today there was euphoria for UKIP. They knocked the Lib Dems into fourth place. With UKIP doing so well, the Prime Minister comes under greater pressure to act tough on Europe.
For the people of Cameron Court, is it all over for their prime ministerial namesake? Well, most people we've spoken to here actually voted Labour, but elsewhere in public opinion, there may be a bit more hope for the Prime Minister. When last week he was accosted on national television by Philip Schofield with a list of supposed paedophiles, that may actually have been a defining moment for him. The Prime Minister's own pollsters show that the public thought he handled it rather well. So this period in the Parliament may not actually be too much of a low point for David Cameron.
If true, Corby has not yet noticed. David Cameron will have to work to ensure he remembers Louise Mensch for her time in Parliament rather than her departure.
Well, Louise Mensch, who was the Conservative MP for Corby, is in New York. Was this defeat your fault?
Yes, it was. Absolutely. I had to resign to be with my family, not because I couldn't take the pressure. The Prime Minister was very good about allowing me to work my schedule around my children, but because my husband lived in America and we were facing a possible 13-year separation from each other. That doesn't make it any easier for the party on the ground, and I know this was really difficult for them. Under those circumstances, I think a swing of 12%, Crewe and Nantwich was 17%, represents a very respectable result for Christine Emmett and the local party, and I think there'll be some quiet satisfaction at it.
Well, bless you for doing that psephology from all those thousands of miles away, but this is pretty bad for the Conservatives, isn't it? You're now in a worse position in Corby than you were at the height of Tony Blair's powers in 1997. Your share of the vote significantly down.
Well, with respect, it's a by-election. I don't think the governing party has won a marginal by-election in something like 20 years. We've seen over and over again, even safe seats change hands against the governing party in a by-election, and that's when they didn't have to contend with the sitting MP leaving for family reasons. Now, under those circumstances, to get 12% swing is pretty run-of-the-mill, if that. So I don't think that it's anything that we can draw wider lessons from. And indeed, we saw in Labour's failure to take Bristol that the message hasn't gone out across the country.
What about
it's a by-election situation and a by-election result.
What about all your former constituents who were telling Allegra it was about unemployment, it was about immigration, it was about hospitals, not about you?
Some of them were saying that, but of course these are vox pops, it depends where you go. I think the anecdotal evidence on the ground was that people didn't really understand why I'd left, and they were understandably disappointed, and I can very much see that. You know, of course an MP should sit out their term if they possibly can. I couldn't do that, and it's something I will always regret, having put the party in that position.
Do you think they didn't understand why you went because your version of events was flatly contradicted publicly by your own husband?
Well, I think that was what was on the doorstep before that interview came out, but these are the perils for me of not talking politics with my very left-wing husband. I think Peter got confused.
Sorry, wait a minute, Miss Mensch. This isn't about talking politics, this is about talking family. You said you went to New York to keep the family together. He said she thought she'd get killed at the next election. You did talk politics with him.
That wasn't a reason. Well, early on in my term as an MP, I would worry about the polls. I would confide that to Peter. But once I'd made the decision to step down anyway, which I might say was a front page story in my local paper in October 2011, so it is a matter of public record. When you decide to step down at the next election, you then cease to worry about the polls quite naturally. If you're not going to run, they really don't matter. Worries about elections are a reason not to stand again, but not a reason to leave mid-term.
Your husband also says, forgive me, your husband also says you were worried about not being promoted. Perhaps you weren't Conservative Party enough. Was that another reason?
Well, that's Peter's view, not mine, with apologies to the Labour MP Austin Mitchell, who said I shouldn't contradict my master in public. Peter, who obviously loves me very much, was much more worried about it than I was. Contrary to massive public rumour, I never wanted to be a minister, and I remember asking the Chief Whip if one day I might make PPS. You know, I had small children to look after. I spent 2 days a week in my constituency, weekly surgeries. I could never have done it in the first place, and I never wanted to.
If you are taking all the blame for this, as you've so candidly done, and if this defeat does turn out to be the beginning of the end for David Cameron, that's quite something to hang around your neck, isn't it?
Well, the one doesn't follow from the other. I do have to take the blame for this defeat, whilst at the same time knowing that there genuinely was no other choice for my family, and it's not something I would ever have done frivolously. But as I said, a by-election with a modest historic swing is not going to mean anything to David Cameron's leadership. The same polling that exactly predicted the margin of victory for Labour in Corby showed that voters in the constituency prefer the economic team of David Cameron and George Osborne to Miliband and Balls. So I don't think this has any wider connotations whatsoever.
Louise Mensch in New York, thank you.